So it's an early Sunday afternoon edition of the All 32 Pod. Mike Giardi alongside Will Parkinson. As always, the show brought to you by Prize Picks, the exclusive daily fantasy partner of the CLNS Media Network. And Game Time, best tickets, best prices to get you into any event you want to see. We bump up our normal Monday pod to Sunday because, well, what we thought was going to happen, what we were telling you was going to happen here on this podcast, did happen. Mike Vrabel is the new head coach of the New England Patriots. He will be announced at a press conference on Monday at noon. Of course, yours truly will be there, dutifully recording and asking questions of the new head coach of the Patriots. Quickly, just right man, right time, culture they need, identity they need, order they need, better game management. Mike Vrabel brings all these things to the table.
As we're recording this, we're transparently Broncos-Bills. The Broncos just threw a 50-yard touchdown to Marvin Mims. I know Troy Franklin, I apologize, 45 yards. We'll see if that one gets interesting, and we'll have more to talk about on these games. So, if you come here for the games, again, we'll have a lot of that talk. The games yesterday sucked, and we know that. I would say from a Vrabel perspective, as soon as they fired Mayo, and kind of the winds, timeline-wise, the winds started to blow pretty strongly. After he interviewed in person with the Jets, I believe it was Thursday or Friday of that week, I think it's either a week or 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago, whatever it was. Yeah, I guess last Friday, so a little over a week ago. And it felt like Mayo was on thin ice. You had talked about it on our show Friday. You said if they're going to do it, they're going to get rid of the whole staff, and everyone's going to be gone. And you're like, it's probably they might be undecided, they might not be. We weren't sure, but it certainly felt weird going to that game. And then, just from a timeline perspective, essentially bench Drake May, right? They showed their ass a little bit. I think they were pretty okay with losing, last Sunday. Mm-hmm. Obviously, we know what happened during the game, and everyone, at least from the outside perspective, was like, "Oh, did that save Mayo's job?" And he's fired 90 minutes after the post game. We know the whole story. The Patriots had their sham of a hiring process. Yes, they interviewed Ben Johnson. I think there was legitimate interest there. Mike, correct me if I'm wrong. I think there was. He was the guy that, if it wasn't Vrabel, they were hoping they could get someone in for Drake May and be that offensive mastermind genius. But the Pep Hamilton, Byron Leftwich of it all. We obviously know about that. Elliott Wolf remaining, Alonzo Highsmith remaining. So there was no real change other than Alex Van Pelt, DeMarcus Covington, and Gerard Mayo. We had the Mayo post yesterday on Instagram from Mrs. Mayo. Mm-hmm. Selfishly, I kind of hope someone else in the AFC East hires Gerard Mayo just to see the antics of how that could unfold in the future. But it always felt like this was Mike Vrabel. I remember talking to people around the Jets, and they felt like if the job didn't open, it was the Vegas or the Jets. It was like there were options. And from all reporting, which take it for what it is, Vegas, the Bears, and Jets all made last-second pushes for Mike Vrabel. But I think everyone knew the second this job opened, it was a matter of get the money right, do your due diligence with the other teams, but we want you. We're going to move fast. And the Patriots got their guy. Certainly raises the floor of this team. The ceiling, I think, is potentially the question you may have about this hire of just like, hey, is the ceiling of a Ben Johnson with Drake May, is that ceiling a little higher? Maybe you could argue that that's certainly a possibility, but I think from a floor perspective, this puts them as, you'd argue he's the best coach in the division, unless, it depends on what the Jets do, I guess, but the way they're trending, that's probably not going to matter. I think he's already a better coach than Mike McDaniel. I think you would argue he's had more success than Sean McDermott, and you'd probably in a big game go Vrabel over McDermott. At least as successful as McDermott has been. So right now the Patriots have a young quarterback, a star corner, and a head coach. The rest is up for debate on where they're at. I think they had to get this right. And again, he's not a Belichick guy. And look, Mike Vrabel is the best coach on the market, and the Patriots locked him up in the first week of the head coaching hiring process.
Yes, you mentioned the sham search, and it absolutely positively was, right? But at the end of this, if I'm the Patriots, well, I know how they feel. Who cares? I don't care that you think it's a sham. And yes, did they get heat from the league for it? Absolutely. But they fired Gerard Mayo knowing full well Mike Vrabel was option 1, option 2, and option 3. And the fact that they were able to get it done. It's the second fastest coaching hire at the end of a season since Ron Rivera got hired by Washington in 2019. That took just 2 days. This took a full 7 days to get it done, but quite frankly, I think it could have gotten done on Monday afternoon if the rules were in place that allowed that to happen. So they went through their sham process, but they settled on the right guy. Your point about raising the floor, but now what's the ceiling? So now it becomes the next interesting part of this whole process, right? And that is, who's the offensive coordinator? Who's the defensive coordinator? Now, we know even if Mike gets an inexperienced defensive coordinator, whatever he decides to do there, and it appears, at least now, that Shane Bowen, who was his guy for 3 years, actually 4, even though he didn't have the title for one of those years in Tennessee, appears likely that he is staying in New York. At least that's the vibe. I think Mike Garafolo put something out about that today on the pregame show, and Mike is very tapped in. So the defensive hire might be a little bit more difficult, but offensively, that's the big hire. What do you do? Because obviously people look back and say, well, their offenses were run first, and were they that creative? And you look at some of the metrics and you say, it wasn't that great. Well, he hired Matt LaFleur. LaFleur was his coordinator for 1 year and immediately got tabbed as the head coach of Green Bay. Then he brought in Arthur Smith. Arthur did terrific work working around the pieces that he had. Ryan Tannehill, again, not at that point, probably the 12th or 13th best quarterback. Drake May's ceiling is certainly higher than that, and he did some good things. So I think Mike has proven that from a philosophy sense, even though it looks like he's a run-first coach, that he is willing to meld. I think he does take this from the Belichick way of the school of thinking of we will be a game plan team. Yes, there are things that we do, but we're also going to come into it going, well, they're really good at this. And if we sit in this, we're going to be screwed. Or if we keep calling this over and over again, it's not going to work. And I think he's shown the willingness and capabilities to adapt. So that offensive coordinator hire is going to be massive, I think. Obviously, we talked on Friday, Josh McDaniels. There's connection there. Ownership likes Josh McDaniels. There's not a real concern that Josh McDaniels is going to get a head coaching job anytime soon, if ever at all. So you look at that situation and say, well, if we bring in a good offensive coordinator and Drake May flies under him, it's not necessarily going to be, oh no, now we have to find the next guy. Josh is financially.
I don't think Josh is going anywhere as a head coach anytime soon.
So then the other names that sort of came up, obviously Tommy Rees, who we worked with. Tommy was the tight ends coach with the Browns this year. Vrabel, of course, worked with the Browns in a number of different roles, including for a while in the tight end room. So there's a connection there. He obviously has not called plays at the National Football League level.
He interviewed with the Browns later last week for their OC job, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
He's also never coached quarterbacks.
No.
Which, again,
weird as a former quarterback.
Yeah, right. Very weird. Tim Kelly, who was his offensive coordinator with the Titans in 2023. I believe Tim is with the Giants as a tight ends coach. I wrote this down and
I'm a Patriots fan. That's the one I'm like, no, please.
Yeah, but just if you're looking for past connections, that's one. And then, of course, there's Nick Caley, who they tried to hire last year under Gerard Mayo. Caley got a bump up with the Rams.
You're correct, by the way. Tim Kelly is the Giants tight end coach. For some reason, Vrabel and tight end coaches really just
yes. So those are 4 names that I sort of put at the front of the list. And again, I think that vision, how we're going to do this and how we're going to morph when your best player on offense is clearly the quarterback at this point. Again, long way to go. People are putting him in the Hall of Fame. We're not there yet, folks, but there's definitely signs that you've got the guy. And now how do you build on that and how do you support him? So those are 4 names that I sort of put out there from the offensive side. Defensively, as I mentioned, Shane Bowen, probably unlikely at this point to leave the Giants. Terrell Williams is someone with the Lions who was Vrabel's defensive line coach in Tennessee for multiple years. The only problem with that is now Williams is the run game coordinator, defensive line coach with the Lions. And if Aaron Glenn gets a head coaching job, which I feel like is going to happen in this cycle, you just wonder if Terrell Williams becomes the immediate push-up, and then that scratches that name off the list. I'm not going to pronounce his name right. Ephraim Banda, who just interviewed. He's a Cleveland assistant. He just interviewed for the Colts DC job. Again, the connection with Vrabel being there in Cleveland this past year. So those are some names on that front. And I'll give you just quickly So it still appears that Elliott Wolf is going to be on at least through the draft, and that the Crafts would like him to stay on longer. Ryan Cowden, however, we're getting reports already, and we talked about this. Cowden was his interim GM. Vrabel's in Tennessee after John Robinson was fired. That's who Vrabel wanted to be hired when they had the official opening. And of course, there was the shotgun marriage with Rand Carthon. Carthon wins, Carthon stays, Vrabel gets fired, and then Carthon gets fired last week. Ryan Cowden appears to be in line for a position within the organization. And again, they haven't named a GM ever. Wolf's not the GM, although that's technically his job. So I wonder about the language and how you make that work, and whether they're going to be on an equal plane, if he's going to be underneath him, if he's going to be above him. I don't know, but that's the vibe that we're picking up out of Foxboro right now. One other quick note, the Vrabel and the Raiders. And we talked about the Raiders job last week, and I say, hey, I'm telling you, the Brady impact. But according to multiple reports today, which I've since confirmed, Vrabel told the Raiders, don't bother. If you want to know why there wasn't a requested interview on the books, because he told them, pretty sure I'm going to be the Patriots head coach, and I don't want to waste your time. So again, back to the sham hiring thing, sham process. He was telling people that a while ago, Will. So that's sort of where it lies now for the Patriots. And certainly, I think for the first time in a long time, certainly the last couple of years, there's positivity surrounding the football team.
Buzz next year going into the year.
Yeah.
And real expectation. I know the roster. This is the one place where I'm a little, I would just say be patient if you're a Patriots fan, or try to be patient. This is not going to be a one-year thing. I'd be very surprised if next year the Patriots were talking they're a 12-win football team. They could have a great offseason, and Drake May takes a Josh Allen level leap in year 2, or Josh's year 3 leap. And we're talking about, wow, they're competing with Buffalo. And that might happen. Do I think they could be a team that could address enough holes this offseason? And we'll talk obviously about this as much as we can. And Vrabel gets them 4+ wins more than Mayo, and that leaves them around 7-8 wins, and then the talent raises them to 9 or 10, and they sneak in. Sure, I think that's very much they'll be on the table. They have to get this offseason right. I mean, they got to get 4 starting offensive linemen and receiver.
Is that it? Just 4?
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. There's a lot of work to be done, but I think there's real hopefulness. There's real reason to be optimistic of, someone asked me Drake May's rookie year, and I know Patriots fan probably won't like this, a very similar-ish Darnold rookie year at the Jets, where the roster was so horrendous, the coaching around him was so bad, but you saw like genuine, real flashes where like the numbers weren't amazing, but the eye test was like, hey man, like I know he turned the ball over a bunch, but there's some serious juice and pop. And the reason Sam got worse because of what was surrounding him and mono and all these different things. So I don't want people to take that from it. My point is, like, the Jets were in this opposite spot post 2018. They didn't hire Mike Vrabel. They hired Adam Gase. And the reason I say that is if the Patriots got this hire right, which I think anyone would assume this will, at least the Patriots should be competitive every year with Mike Vrabel. They should be a team that you have real expectation for competitive, good football, especially at home and especially on the road. Like there shouldn't be 40-3 to the Chargers, late in the year. It should be, hey, we're fighting, we're clawing, like we're going to be a team. Even those Titans teams that the last 2 years with Mike Vrabel, 6-11, quarterback, we talk about that game, and I think it's a real testament to why Vrabel is going to get the 17, 18, 60, whatever $1 million a year. Malik Willis, Sunday Night Football, against all these guys out with COVID and injuries and all these different things, and he goes into Kansas City and they push them to the wire, man. And like that's the most out of very Belichick-ish and from that perspective. So I think Patriots fans, if they're patient with the adding of talent to this roster and like probably a 2-year, this year and next year, 2025, 26, hoping 25, can we take a step to be a 7 to 9 or 10 win team and show real promise and be like, hey, we're 1 more or 2 more guys away, and then take that leap in 26 to being a legit contender for the division and maybe throughout the conference. Again, anything could happen, but I just think that if you have that approach as a Patriots fan, you're gonna be feeling really good. Of like, got quarterback, we have an all-pro corner, we have a all-pro level defensive tackle that should be back next year. Mm-hmm. Our defense is gonna be built around those 2 guys, and we'll We'll build it up around them. And then on offense, we should have a running game next year, no matter what, under Vrabel. And Ramondre he's extended, obviously. And I know he's not a perfect player, but you probably feel good about, hey, can he be 75% of what Derrick Henry was in Tennessee? And I know it's a bad day to talk about Derrick Henry after last night, but you get my point. And then it's like, hey, can we add two pieces on offense around Hunter Henry and Ramondre? And then maybe Polk is like at least 50% of the guy we thought he was going to be, or can Pop Douglas take one more notch? You know what I mean? Like, you're just looking for little things there, and say Vrabel's going to outcoach 80%. I mean, I don't know, give or take, Mike, maybe that range. Like, that's where I'm telling you, I feel like that if that's your realistic mindset as a Patriots fan, you're going to next year going, I'm excited. I'm not out of whack with where we're at. And like, let's try to go sneak in the playoffs and get back some of that Patriots luster where we don't get blown out at home. We're competitive at home and we go on the road. And the best thing you can say about us is you hate playing against us. That's where a Mike Vrabel team is going to look like.
So I posted a story early this afternoon on Boston Sports Journal, and I said, it's Mike Vrabel. It's always been Mike Vrabel. No amount of dickering about the money was going to eventually derail this. There was, sort of a strong feeling within the building that this was the direction they were going to end up in. And now they have a chance to become something they haven't been for the last couple of years, and that's respectable. And that's been a missing element in Foxboro. And I think ownership has had either a hard time understanding that, or just completely unaware of how they're discussed now in league circles. And look, there's not a lot of love for them in league circles just because of the arrogance, which they felt like Bill in particular, but even definitely trickled down or trickled up to ownership in terms of that arrogance. And getting Vrabel back in the building now gives, as we were talking about, sort of the positive vibes. And the roster is still a mess. I think that there's 25 guys on this roster that need to be swapped out in this next year, like legitimately, and important pieces too. As you talked about, multiple offensive linemen, at least 3, maybe 4, depending on how you feel about David Andrews coming back off the injury that he suffered. And I know he wants to come back and would be someone who makes a lot of sense coming back, just based on sort of the person that he is and the ability to help. Hey, this is what we're going to have to deal with. And as I had one player told me, we know he's an a-hole, but this year proved, or should have proved to everyone, that we need an a-hole, that we're not good enough. B, we have a lot of young guys who don't know what it takes to be a professional or how much work has to go in to win, right? And Vrabel at least can say, look, 9-7, 9-7, 11-5, 12-5, number 1 seed at 12-5, despite using 91 players, a league record that season. And I know they didn't win in the playoffs, and so that will be held against him. But like, that's sort of a pretty good thing to put up on the wall and say, hey, fellas, believe in what I'm doing, and we can do this too. And we don't always have to be the most talented, but we will be the most prepared. And I think that was another thing that sort of showed this year, the lack of preparation, or the lack of ability from the coaching staff to adjust, sort of mid-game to what other teams are doing. When they have a counterpunch to what our punch was, we didn't have a counter. With Mike Vrabel, assuming he surrounds himself with a good staff, they'll have that ability now.
Well, my one criticism will be of this hire, if it plays out in a certain way, as we kind of wrap up here, would just be try to not run back the whole Belichick staff.
Yes.
I think there's pieces. I think there's a lot to be said for Josh McDaniels being he runs an offense that the majority of the offense league is going to run in some form or fashion. And I think there's nothing wrong with that, especially knowing, we talked a lot about how much money the Raiders owe him and these different things with offset money and things. Or, does that kind of save Vrabel to spend maybe more on a DC or spend more on whatever? And I think all those things are very good points. I just would say, if I'm him, everyone has relationships, and we see this is not a new thing in the league. But I would say if Vrabel has done a really good job of plucking offensive coordinators, or defensive coordinators too, I don't want to say out of thin air, because it's not respectful to LaFleur and Arthur Smith and these guys. But I don't think when those guys were hired, I don't think any of us were like, they're going to be a head coach in 12 to 24 months. And I would like to see Vrabel go maybe that route more and then say Josh is the fallback. Josh doesn't need to work if he doesn't want to.
No.
Stay away from the Judges and the Patricias and those guys. I know a lot of those guys are with UNC and are rumored to be going potentially there. And Bill is going to set Steve Belichick up for the UNC job in a year when he inevitably leaves back to the NFL. But try to, and it's no disrespect to those two dynasties the Patriots had in any way, but the game is a little different now. And I think Vrabel is going to bring some fresh ideas a little bit. And it felt like Mayo's tenure was a crappy finishing end of the Belichick run in a sense. Like it just felt like a bad version of Bill. And Vrabel is not that. I just from an assistant perspective, I just would implore him to be a couple of creative hires, maybe one creative front office one out of nowhere that you don't know, or me and you talked about this. Mike Munchak should be this team's offensive line coach next year. And he
should be one of the first phone calls you make. If not, you got the offensive coordinator and you're calling Munchak and saying, "Hey, do you want to come back and coach?"
And there's a possibility, as much as for this Patriots team, it might be Abdul Carter, it might be Ted McMillan, it might be Travis Hunter. There's a very good argument it should be offensive line, and say, hey, look at the Chargers rebuild. It's kind of like they should have probably done a bunch of different things last year, but they went with the offensive line. Harbaugh raised the floor, and they're a playoff team. And I know they choked yesterday. And again, I know people are going to be like, oh, really? That's the example? But it's like they won 11 games this year. And I think Patriots fans would be quite happy to win 11 games and lose in a playoff game.
We were talking about that Charger team was really well coached and tough. And obviously Herbert melted down yesterday amongst others. But they are ahead of schedule. That team should not have been in the playoffs this year. They took advantage of all the opportunities. They beat the bad teams. They didn't beat good teams this year, but they beat the bad teams. And if you beat the bad teams, then you're in the mix. You have a chance to get into the postseason. I want to talk about the Jets quickly, but of course we have to satisfy the people that help us, and that's of course Prize Picks. We're in the postseason, guys. We're running out of time for football. So if you're a big football head, get involved with Prize Picks. 10 million members and a chance to win up to 1,000 times your cash. All you do is pick more or less on at least two players for a shot to win up to, that's right, 1,000 times your cash. Think about Monday night, Matthew Stafford. Do you think Matthew Stafford's going to go off in that game? He had week 18 off. They got him rested. How about Puka Nacua? Same thing. If you think they're going to have big games, go look at the numbers. More or less, take more, and you have a chance to win and win big. Just download the app. Use the code CLNS to get $50 off instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today and use the code CLNS for $50 off instantly after you pay your first $5 lineup. You don't even have to win with that $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. And as a reminder, if you want to go to games, never mind just NFL games, there's a big college football playoff game, although the ticket prices for that are bananas. But also NHL, NBA. Pretty soon, it's going to be spring training baseball, the baseball season. That's right around the corner. Use Game Time. Simple. It's easy. You can see where your seat is. You get the vision. You're not sitting behind some pole. 100% cash back guarantee if you find a better price somewhere else. And Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets to find the best value. So download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account. Redeem the code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets. Lowest prices guaranteed. And before we get out of here on this super emergency pod edition of the All 32, I kind of got the words all screwed up there, but you know what I meant. Where do the Jets stand now? Because clearly, and we talked about it when we talked about it 6 weeks ago, Mike Vrabel made a lot of sense for what the Jets wanted to do. And I think Mike Vrabel had genuine interest in what the Jets were all about until, of course, the Patriots job's going to be opening up. And as I said, he even told the Raiders, peace, we're not even bothering because this is the job I want. Where did the Jets go? Where are they? Or what are you hearing at this point about their search, both for the general manager and a head coach?
Yeah. So Jets are, this process. I would say there's a pretty good chance when we're recording our Friday episode, we'll be doing another emergency pod of a hiring. We're going to try to do, and I didn't even run this by Mike, we'll try to do these for all, there's only so many openings. So we'll try to, especially if they go in a group, we'll try to group them. But if not, we'll try to get something out in a reaction to not just Jets and Pats stuff, but The Jets have completed 13 GM interviews. They've been Rooney Rule compliant for some time now. You can hire a GM even if their team's in the playoffs. So Mike Borgonzi, for example, who I think should be the choice. Nick Hallaby, an analytics offensive kind of minded guy who the Jets to go back-to-back Eagle guys would be interesting. I don't think he's the favorite, but he's certainly a name to watch. There was a couple other ones that were, interesting for different reasons. So Brian Gain, I know who you've kind of been familiar with, and these other different names. The one name that I think was at the bottom of my list personally, in terms of what I was building of hey, these are the names the Jets should talk to, who I believe got his first GM interview this year. Correct me if I'm wrong. Since he was fired in Indianapolis, is Ryan Grigson. He went and worked in Philly. Then has been with Minnesota the last couple of years. Look, I think he had a great record in Indianapolis: 11-5, 11-5, 8-8, 8-8. I would say as time's gone on, I think that GM tenures even looked worse with Ryan Grigson. And look, he inherited a 2-14 team, and everyone gave him credit. Oh my God, they went 11-5. He was, executive of the year in 2012. Mikey, if you remember, the Patriots the Colts were a playoff team the year prior to that. Yeah. They lost to the Jets in 2010 in the wild card round. They had gone to the Super Bowl the year before that. The reason they were 2-14 is because they played Curtis Painter at quarterback when Peyton Manning had the neck issues. They clearly tanked that year, and Andrew Luck was one of the 3 best quarterback prospects we've ever seen. Grigson traded a first-round pick for Trent Richardson. There you go.
That right there. And he did a terrible job of the offensive line, right?
Yeah, offensive line. Yeah, the bottom line is Andrew Luck retired at age 29 and said, I'd rather play football than play behind what I've been, what I've been subject to. So right now there's a lot of winds blowing that Ryan Grigson and Brian Flores will be the pairing in New York. Again, there's nothing that I've heard. It's like, wow, that's the pairing. It just, there's been a lot of, you talk to people around, that cover the Jets and different things, and that's at least where the winds are blowing is Ryan Grigson and Brian Flores. I still think Aaron Glenn's the favorite for the Jets job. He called it his dream job. There is also a lot of chatter that the Saints would make the most sense for him. I don't really understand why you would choose the Saints, no disrespect, with the situation they're in over the Jets, where it feels like you could have at least more success early on with the Jets. And, it's all about job security in this league.
100%. What gives you a better chance to win right away? Because as we just saw, Gerard Mayo's the guy. I knew he was going to be the guy. And he didn't even last, he had one full season, but not even a full year on the job before he gets fired. And, it's like, what happened to the support? But to your point, you go to a Saints team that is perpetually pushing the cap, which God bless them, just kind of proves to people about you can do pretty much whatever you want. They've been doing it with the cap for 7 years now. Granted, it's the results have been diminishing as they've gone along here, but yeah, you go there is a chance that thing bottoms out. There is a chance you could be 3-14 next year. And, that's a passionate fan base. They say, oh my God, we hired the wrong guy. And does ownership react to that and pull the plug on him? Whereas at least in New York, we can say what we want to say about Woody, but there has been some patience with these hires, right?
Well, yeah, too much patience.
Yeah, right. Yeah, particularly Joe Douglas, who had 800 years as the general manager and never was able to get him over the hump.
Yeah, the last thing I'll say is, again, I think McCown has a shot here. I think Matt Nagy has an outside shot. I think Glenn and Flores are the favorites. I think both guys would be good hires. I think McCown would come with Flores. It seems like the odds-on favorite right now would be Grigson GM, Flores head coach, McCown OC is, and again, overall, McCown and Flores would make you pretty excited. I think this division, if you're a Patriots fan, I don't think you want to see Brian Flores twice a year, personally. Nope. Josh McCown has a lot of potential. Grigson's just been a disaster as a GM, and I think it'd be very disappointing if the Jets went through this entire search and they ended up with a guy who. This is a good test. Mike, we joke about this, and one of my, Joe Caporoso, who I do some of the other stuff with, he said, do the test of your rival fan base. If they hired this person, what would your reaction be? And if you're a Patriots fan or a Dolphins or Bills fan, you see the Jets hired Ryan Grigson. Your reaction's probably, haha, idiot. Yeah, you're clapping, you're pumped. they hire Flores, you'd be like, some people, Dolphins fans would be like, screw Flores. Patriots fans and Bills fans would be like, he's a pretty good coach.
Yeah, I mean, the Flores thing, and look, I've talked about this quite a bit over the last few years. And there's an incredible podcast with Ryan Fitzpatrick and Andrew Whitworth where Fitzpatrick goes in on Flores and just how he changed as a head coach from year one to what he became by the time he was fired in year 3. And there was a lot going on there. And I've expressed to you my reservations about Flores, not from the sense of he's a really smart dude. He's a terrific with X's and O's, but the stories that came out of Miami, some that never have gotten public, and Fitzpatrick said it, dictatorship or a dictator is what he became. And that's not the guy who left New England. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again here, that I thought when Brian Flores left New England, of all the people that left New England, from Charlie Weiss to Romeo Crennel to Joe Judge to Josh McDaniels to Matt Patricia, I thought Flores was the most equipped to do the job at the next level because I thought Brian Flores was his own man. And that's what I saw with him in New England. He was not Bill Belichick. He did not try to be Bill Belichick. He was Brian Flores. He told players he loved them. He also cursed them out. He knew their kids' names. He knew their wives. And then he would curse them out. But you had to understand there was a good balance there. Bill didn't give you that balance. Flores gave you that balance. And I thought when he went to Miami, he would be that guy. I thought he did a terrific job in year 1. That was the tank for Tua or tank for whatever. They were incredibly competitive in the second half of the season after getting beat by like 40 points a couple times at the beginning of the season. And I thought this is going to take off and he's going to be someone to fear. But he became someone who people in the building feared. And I think that was a massive problem and led to sort of the disconnect. And look, there's other stuff there. Stephen Ross with the, tampering with Brady and all the different things that went on. So I'm not saying that he's completely, that all the blame falls on him. The question is, how much has he learned? And that's a tough one to get over. And I think he probably deserves a second chance, but maybe the second chance, maybe he'd be better served if the second chance was in New Orleans and not in New York. We do the reverse here with Glenn. I feel like Aaron might be equipped better to deal with the constant attention that you'll get in New York. Whereas I think Flores struggled with that in Miami, and Miami's media contingent is small. I mean, there were times where I was there covering him at the NFL Network where there were 7 or 8 people in the room. There won't be 7 or 8 people in any room ever with the Jets. So is he capable of that? Yeah. So that again, he's a smart guy, so he should have learned, and he said he's learned. But Josh McDaniel told me he learned from his first experience in Denver to his second one in Vegas. And then you talk to all the people in Vegas, and Josh McDaniels was basically the same guy that he was in Denver 10 years prior. And talking about the relationships and how important it was. He didn't build those relationships. He didn't foster them in Vegas, just like he didn't foster them in Denver. So It's like you want to give the guy a second opportunity, but you also got to know, this guy, he went down the wrong path the last time.
Yeah, you got to be careful. Two things here where we can touch more on this, midweek. Just 2 things to monitor. Peter Schrager had the report out for a while. Marcus Freeman and the Bears. Tom Pelissero had a report supporting that, essentially saying they're going to have interest there. Again, I mentioned his buyout. He's a guy who every single team should be calling. I think he's kind of what you're hoping you get in a Vrabel type. He's just 38 years old, and not that Vrabel's old by any means. Obviously, I'm just saying there's a known with Vrabel, positives, any negatives, etc. Marcus Freeman, it's kind of only positives right now. That's what happens when you're a young coach like this. So there's that, and then something I want to talk about later in the week. Schefter reported a team's already called on Mike Tomlin to trade for him. I think the Jets and other teams should at least call.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Bears or other teams should at least call. The one thing that Tomlin has not had in a long time is a quarterback, and assume with Caleb, that defense, that would make a lot. He's built for that NFC North type of division that screams Mike Tomlin. He apparently has a no trade clause, so just something to keep, a cliffhanger, I guess, at the end here. Just 2 things to monitor, and as we go along, and we'll obviously break down these games the Bills just go up 10-7 here. Me and Mike want to make sure we're locked in on these games, but obviously Patriots hired Mike Vrabel, and exciting news at up in Foxboro.
Yeah, awesome day today. 3 games, and like I said, we'll get back to you at some point during the course of the week. And as Will mentioned, as especially if it's the Jets and something big breaks, we'll be right here for you. That's going to wrap up this edition of the All 32 Pod. He is Will Parkinson. I'm Mike Giardi. Thanks for tuning in on a Sunday. We appreciate you. Like, subscribe, listen, do a great review, do all those wonderful things, and we'll talk to you again soon. Enjoy the football.